Recording. All right, guys. Well, I'm actually going to do a story with you guys that I did this morning, and it was not my plan. But when I did this story, it's like, wow, I want to go deeper into this. And this is a Joseph story, from the life of Joseph in Genesis. And we went through Joseph there for a little bit, and uh, what happened to Joseph with his brothers?
They love each other so much.
Yeah, yeah, that loving family. That they saved a lot of money for Christmas presents. But yeah,
There were some seriously scary brothers.
I think that's a good way to put it, Sam. Seriously scary brothers. And what
Very
did they do, Joseph?
dysfunctional family.
Yeah.
Dysfunctional family.
Yeah, dysfunctional.
I think of Dr. Phil, like the whole family, let's have them on and bring out their dirt. And you're like, oh my gosh, thank goodness that's not my family.
Yeah, you better have extra security guards. So they sold Joseph into slavery in Egypt. And whose house did he go to?
Potiphar.
Yeah, Potiphar's house. And what happened there?
It was great. Everything prospered under Potiphar. Potiphar's whole household.
Yeah.
Everything he had was prospered under him, and he just got handed more and more stuff until he was over everything.
And then what happened?
Then Joseph started hitting on Potiphar's wife.
Or something like that, right? Remember, this
Yeah,
is being recorded, and people who don't know what we're doing are going to be watching this. So,
Fine. Potiphar's wife started hitting on Joseph. Okay.
yeah, and now, and we talk about this a little bit. Slavery was a big deal in Egypt, right? For countries that are, that have a foundation of slavery, do you think it would be important to make an example of somebody that was trying to rape of a slave that was trying to rape somebody's wife?
They usually had to die, didn't they?
Yeah, just common sense, you would think that, right? But what did Potiphar do with Joseph?
He went to jail.
Put him in jail, didn't
Yeah, put him in jail.
A political jail.
Yeah.
Not a regular, because they don't really have regular jails, I don't think.
Yeah, and what was Potiphar's position? Does anybody remember what his title was? The captain.
He was the captain of the guard.
Yeah, he was the captain of the guard. Yeah. And so then you remember the two guys got arrested and thrown into prison with Joseph, and Joseph interpreted their dream. And the chief butler, he got out. The chief baker, not so much. Right? And what was it that Joseph asked the chief butler?
Please
Remember
me.
Yeah, when you get out, remember me, because I don't deserve to be here, right? And that leads us to our story from God's Word today. So after 2 years, yes, Diane.
And I would also say that Joseph rises to the top within the prison, and he becomes more like one of the helpers than just a guy that's in a cell.
Yeah, thank you. That's very important. So here's our story from God's Word. So after 2 years, Pharaoh had a dream. And in this dream, he was standing by the Nile and he was looking, and 7 cows came up out of the Nile, and they were healthy and well fed. And as they began to graze among the reeds of the Nile, 7 other cows came from the Nile, and they were thin and sickly. And these thin and sickly cows, they kind of watched the other 7 cows, and then they ate the 7 healthy cows. And Pharaoh, he woke up, and then he fell back asleep, and he had another dream. And in this dream, there were 7 plump heads of grain that were on one stalk. And then there were 7 thin heads of grain that had been scorched by the east wind. And the 7 thin heads of grain consumed the 7 plump heads of grain. And Pharaoh woke up and he realized it was just a dream. But the next morning, Pharaoh was really troubled by these dreams. And he called the magicians and the wise men of Egypt. And he told them his dreams. But none of them could give him interpretation. And then the chief butler spoke up and said, "Oh, Pharaoh, today I am reminded of my faults, because your servant had displeased Pharaoh, and Pharaoh put me and the chief baker under the command of the captain of the guards. And while we were under the captain of the guard's command, we both had dreams. And on the same night, and those dreams had different meanings. Well, there was a young Hebrew slave of the captain of the guards that was in the jail, and he asked us to tell him our dreams, and we did. And he gave us the interpretation, and each of the interpretations was different, and each of the interpretations came true. I was released from prison, and the chief baker was hung. Well, Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and Joseph, he shaved, and he changed his clothes, and then he went to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said, "Look, I've had some dreams, and I hear that you can interpret dreams." And Joseph said, "No, I can't." And he said, "But God can give you the interpretation of your dreams and bring you peace." And that's our story from God's word. So I'm gonna have you guys kind of help me with this a little bit. How long was it that since
2 years.
Yeah, 2 years. And what happened with Pharaoh?
He
He had some dreams.
Yeah, he had a dream. Do you remember where he was standing in his dream?
By the river.
Yeah, he was standing by the Nile. And what came out of the river?
7.
cows.
Fat cow.
Oh, nice looking cow.
Yeah, 7 healthy, well-fed cows. And what did they begin to do?
Grazing.
Eat the reeds.
Yeah, they began to graze among the reeds of the Nile. And then what happened?
There were
Another
7
My cow.
unhealthy cows.
Yeah, 7 thin and sickly cows came up, and they were watching the other 7 cows. And then what happened?
They ate them.
Ate 'em.
Yeah, that's just a disturbing visual, right? So the 7 thin and sickly cows ate the 7 healthy cows, and then what Pharaoh do?
He woke
He
up.
woke up.
Yeah, he woke up, and after a little bit,
Fell back
Fell
asleep.
asleep
He
again.
went back to
fell back
sleep.
asleep. Yeah, and while he's asleep, what happened?
He had
Had
another
another
dream.
dream.
Another dream.
Another dream. What'd he see?
7 fat
7
heads
grain. Head of grain.
on
Yeah,
one
7 plump heads of grain. That's the way I kind of like to describe myself. I'm not fat. I'm just plump. And then there were
7 grain of head that's scorched.
yeah
the east
7 thin heads of grain that had been scorched by the east wind. And what did they do?
Ugh.
Consumed.
Everyone.
Yeah, they ate the 7 plump heads of grain. And what happened to Pharaoh?
Woke up.
He woke up.
He woke up and he realized,
It's just a dream.
yeah, it's just a dream. But the next morning,
He was very troubled.
He was really
yeah,
troubled.
he was very troubled.
I would be too.
And so, and what did he do then?
Called for his
Oh.
Magician and wise
And the
man.
wise man.
Yeah, the magicians and the wise men, and he told them his dream, and what'd they say?
No clue.
They can.
Yeah, man, that's just weird, right? And at that moment, somebody spoke up.
The chief
Butler?
butler.
Yeah, the chief cupbearer, the chief butler, spoke up and said, "Today I am."
Aware of my.
Yeah, I'm reminded of my faults because your servant had displeased Pharaoh and
Was put into
myself
jail.
and who else?
Chief baker.
Along with the
Yeah,
baker.
the chief baker were put under the control of whom?
Captain of the guard.
Captain of the guard. And while we were there, we both what?
Had dreams,
A dream.
Yeah, we both had dreams, and they had different
meaning.
different meanings. And there somebody else was there in prison.
Young Hebrew man, slave.
A young Hebrew slave of
Potiphar.
Captain of the guard.
the captain of the guards. Yeah. And he asked us to do what?
Tell him his dream.
Yeah. Tell him our dreams. So we both told him our dreams, and what did he do?
Interpreted.
Yeah. In each of the
Interpretations were different.
Yeah, each of the interpretations was different. And both interpretations,
Correct.
Came true.
yeah, came true. I
Was restored.
Restored.
Yeah, I was restored, and
The other guy was
got
killed.
yeah, the chief baker was hung. And when Pharaoh heard this, he
Send for
Sent for Joseph.
yeah, and they and Joseph quickly went and did what?
Shave and change clothes.
Yeah. And then he came to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh said, "Hey, I've had some dreams, and I heard what?
You can interpret it.
Yeah, you can interpret dreams." And Joseph went, "Yes, I am a gifted dream interpreter, and you're lucky that I'm here."
No,
No.
he said nope.
He said, I
From
don't.
God.
Okay.
I can't interpret dreams.
Oh, he said, "No, I can't." I just
God
love
can.
that. That's to me, of everything that's ever said in the Bible, I just like, I don't think that's quite where I would have gone with that, right? No, I can't, but God will.
Give you peace.
Yeah, he'll give you the interpretation that will bring you peace.
Okay.
Now, some versions say a favorable outcome, but if you look up the word, it is shalom, which is the Hebrew word for peace, right? So, I'm curious, what do you think it might have been like to be Joseph and, man, the chief butler, the cupbearer to the king, was in your prison. God put him there, right? And then gave you an interpretation of your dream, and you interpret his dream, and you're like, he got freed. Man, what do you think might be going on with him emotionally?
Like, oh, I got a way out.
Yeah.
Like, God saw me. He knows that I needed this help. You put this guy there just for me, and I won't be here long.
Yeah, probably packed. Yeah, I can see that.
Or also some anxiousness, like what if he does forget? Or what if the favor doesn't last very long?
Wow. Yeah, Andrew.
Yeah, in a sense, Joseph is a dangerous guy. And I'm thinking that, well, let me tell you why. What he says comes true. And so if he doesn't say anything, it's not going to come true. At least that's the prevailing thought, So here's the chief butler, and he might purposely forget, because if he has another dream and Joseph interprets it, I could lose my head too. Think subconsciously, the best thing for me to
Okay.
do is forget.
Okay, yeah.
And I'm just thinking about this.
Yeah. Joseph's interpretation did not turn out well for the baker. Right? So, yeah. All right, well, let's look at the first part of this story. So, after 2 years, Pharaoh had a dream, and he was standing by the Nile, and 7 healthy, well-fed cows came up out of the Nile, and as they were grazing among the reeds, 7 sickly, thin cows came out of the Nile. As they were watching the 7 healthy cows, they ate them. And Pharaoh woke up, and then after a while, he fell back asleep and had another dream. And in this dream, there were 7 plump heads of grain, all on one stalk. And there were 7 thin heads of grain that had been scorched by the east wind. And the 7 thin heads of grain consumed the plump and good heads of grain. And Pharaoh woke up and he realized it was just a dream. But then in the morning, when he woke up, he was really troubled by these dreams. And he sent for the magicians and the wise men of Egypt, and he told them the dream, but nobody could give him an interpretation. So, so what do we learn about God from the fact that here he had the chief butler, the cupbearer, 2 years ago, in Joseph's presence, gave him this dream, and now 2 years later, Pharaoh has a dream. What might that teach us about God? Yeah, Cheryl.
I think that he had his reasons for keeping Joseph in there. And just thinking about it, maybe like just for him to learn some things, maybe
Humility.
about people about humble people. I don't know. I was, after later on, he was going to have to minister to a lot of different kind of people, to a lot of poor people. And so maybe it was a way of humbling him and getting him prepared for that ministry he was going to have and that hard work, because that was a hard job.
Okay, so God had
So
a
maybe
plan.
God was preparing him.
Yeah, all right. Anybody else?
I think just some basic maturity. You don't necessarily want a 15-year-old in there, or
Yeah.
just he needs to both learn things and just go through the physical maturing, including the mental maturing process.
Okay, all right. Give me the
Just
opportunity.
learning about people too, the emotional aspect of dealing with people. I mean, here's this baker, a butler, and he's, in a perfect world, he would have gone right out and stood up for him. But
Yeah.
coming to the realization that the world's not a perfect place, and I shouldn't expect it to be.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, Diane?
Well, I'm thinking that if he had right away been recognized, the Pharaoh might have said, "Oh, great! I'll take him out of prison and I'll put him in with my magicians and my wise men."
Hmm.
And that's not a good place that's not an education that Joseph needs.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about the dream because we go into detail in that a little bit later. But I'm curious. So Pharaoh calls together the magicians and the wise men, as you mentioned, Diane. And then he tells them the dream. Right? And they say, "Yeah, we got no clue." Right? So do we learn anything about the relationship between the wise men and the magicians and Pharaoh? I mean, could they have done something else?
They could have lied and made something up.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be the first time somebody in that kind of position did that kind of thing, right? So could have lied. Anything else?
They have a good enough relationship with him where they can tell him the truth.
Oh, well, what might that tell us about Pharaoh?
He's a decent bloke.
It's reasonable.
Well,
Nebuchadnezzar.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And it is interesting when you compare this to the other story that appears later that we will not talk about. But these are two different styles of leadership, aren't they?
I think he's not afraid to just put it all out there.
Okay.
Because I always want to guard things. So I might like bring in one and test it out on him and then try another before I, went like, this is not working and bring the whole crew in. But he just seems to be like, let me just get it out there.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Henry.
He doesn't give an ultimatum either. He doesn't say interpret the dream or die.
Yeah.
So he's looking for the truth. He's looking for what the dream really means.
Yeah. And does it seem like the way he has established his leadership that he's more likely to get a truthful answer?
Yeah.
I mean, because a lot of times, Egypt was not a godly country, right? But does it seem like they have a pretty decent, I love what Sam said, a pretty decent bloke as the, as the head of the country? Well, let's look at the next part of the story. Yeah, Cheryl.
Oh, I was just gonna say, and also you kind of see that in the way that the cupbearer kind of jumps in and gives what he needed to say. He wasn't like afraid, I can't say anything, I'm just a cupbearer.
Well, let's go there. So when the cupbearer heard this, he said to Pharaoh, today I'm reminded of my faults. Your servants had displeased Pharaoh, and Pharaoh put me and the chief baker under the control of the captain of the guards. And while we were under his control, we both had dreams, and each of the dreams had different meanings. And there was a young Hebrew slave of the captain of the guards who asked us to tell him our dreams, and he interpreted the dreams. Both dreams had different interpretations, and both interpretations came true. I was restored, and the baker was hung. So, yeah, so I love what Cheryl was saying. So, what else might we learn about Pharaoh from the fact that the chief cupbearer is willing to share what had happened? Do you see the chief butler taking a risk?
Even like brings up his past.
Okay.
Ew, he's not like, let me not say how I know this guy.
Yeah. Hey, remember that time I ticked you off? So
Sure.
If the chief cupbearer does not confess and records are brought forth that show what might have happened, it certainly would go much worse for the cupbearer because he did not confess.
well, you mentioned that, and I want to dig in there a little bit because that's some a thing I have some interest in. Do we have in the previous story, because we've talked about this, so that makes it fair game, all right? Do we have any indication that there was anybody else involved other than Joseph, the chief cupbearer, and the baker,
Pharaoh was involved.
as far as the interpretation of the dream?
Oh, no, that's true.
God.
Yeah, God, right? But and we obviously have God's record, but we're not told that God shared that record with Pharaoh, right? But here's a question I have. Did the interpretation of these dreams have anything to do with the chief baker, or excuse me, chief butler or cupbearer, depending on what title you want to use? Did Joseph's interpretation of the dream have anything to do with him being released?
No.
It does. It probably did not make it into the official archive why he was what happened. That could be. I agree with you.
I mean, was the chief baker going to be released, or chief baker going to be hung, and the chief butler going to be released, regardless of whether Joseph interpreted the dream?
That's a theological question worthy of a discussion.
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, did any of that impact? Where did the release come from?
Pharaoh.
Pharaoh.
From Pharaoh.
Huh. And so, if it didn't have anything to do with the release, I mean, we have this. I mean, getting dreams interpreted. That's pretty cool. Well, what might we learn about God that He had both those dreams interpreted? I mean, what do we see there?
For the interpretation of Pharaoh's dream after 2 years.
Oh, so God is preparing 2 years before what's getting ready to happen. Yeah. Huh.
Yeah, and like giving Joseph confidence that he could listen to God and God could speak to him. Seeing that those things happened, then I think that just builds his confidence in listening to God about interpretations.
Yeah, I mean, if you put, we tend to make people in the Bible into superheroes that don't have any kryptonite, right? But I mean, if Joseph had not had that opportunity for interpretation, could you see where it would be easy for him to possibly question whether those first dreams he had about his brothers and his father and his mother, that like, wow, did I really hear that or not? I mean, could you see where it could leave him open to doubt his walk with the Lord? Yeah, I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah.
Well, and then it says the chief baker and the chief cupbearer, whose control were they put under? Who's the captain of the guards? Potiphar. Huh. And again, I just want us to dig for a few minutes. So who was over this prison? And yet Diane mentioned earlier something that I may have wanted to bring up in my introduction, that Joseph was put under authority in the prison. If Potiphar genuinely believed that Joseph had tried to rape his wife as a slave, do you think that's the way that would have worked? So I wonder, do you think this could possibly give us any indication about Potiphar and his wife's relationship?
Not a very interesting one.
Okay, not a very trusting one. All right. Somebody else. If you remember when he threw Joseph in the prison, it said when he heard what his wife said, he was filled with anger. right? And yet, do we see him venting any anger towards Joseph?
This may not have been the first time this happened with him and his people working under his command that were young and healthy and good looking.
He's bound to being a wee bit mad to lose a really good worker, a really good servant, and thought, right, I can't kill him. And, let's just move him aside until I can figure out how better to deal with this. And,
Somebody I want to kill, but it's not him.
Yeah, that makes me think. Did he lose a good servant, or did he just move him to a different position?
oh,
Well,
move it to-
he lost someone that was causing his whole household to prosper.
Right.
It seems like he does lose some value in what he's getting from Joseph, but he still gets to keep Joseph. But he's got to do something to save face. Your
Yes.
wife makes this big fuss.
Yeah.
You can't call her a liar and somebody that chases after the servants. That's just gonna make you look bad.
Yeah, say it.
But it thinking out loud, good solution. Let's put him into running the prison for me. Let's see who I can put him in his place that my wife is really going to like.
Yeah, I just find all that really, really interesting. Well, let's shift over here to the last part of the story. So when Pharaoh heard this, he quickly sent for Joseph, and Joseph changed his clothes, and he came to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said, "Hey, look, I've had these dreams, and I've heard that you can interpret dreams." And Joseph went, "No, I can't. But God can interpret the dreams and give you an answer that will bring you peace." So does this tell us anything about how troubled Pharaoh was by these dreams?
You don't say that you're going to give somebody peace if they've already got it.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Based on what Joseph said. But the fact he is so willing to send for a prisoner. I mean, this is, that would be like Joe Biden calling for a prisoner to come and give him advice, and no smart political comments by anybody that's on one side or the other. All right. Not opening the door for that. But it would be like the president of a country sending for somebody in a jail cell saying, "Hey, I need your advice on this." I mean, does that tell us anything about how troubled Pharaoh was by these dreams?
They obviously weren't normal dreams.
Yeah, it wasn't just bad baklava, right?
But you also said the story that he had the two dreams, and then he went back to, he woke up and said, "Oh, it's just a dream."
Yeah.
And it's only until next morning he's really troubled. It's like,
Yes.
it was like a little delay.
Be pretty troubled too if I saw wheat eating something. I mean, wheat typically doesn't eat anything, so that'd be pretty weird. And after having like the first dream, it's like, okay, that was a weird dream, but then you have like a second dream that's very similar to the first one, and you're like, that's extra weird.
Yeah, that means something, right? Yeah, Diane.
And this dream has got three really important elements in it. It's got cattle, it's got grain, which most people eat grain and are a little lighter on the cattle,
Right.
and it's got the river, which is like life itself. So
The source of life.
that's some pretty hardcore stuff in there.
Yeah.
If any of that gets messed with.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Cheryl.
I was kind of thinking, this is kind of, may seem silly, but I was thinking about, how urgent it was to Pharaoh to hear from Joseph, because I mean, it says that he he changed his clothes and he shaved, but it doesn't say anything about him taking time to bathe. I was thinking, why did he bathe in the prison or what? So he's coming. I was thinking about that, you know. So they must have just said, okay, hurry, no, okay, we don't have time for that. Just shave and yeah. So I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, because the fact he had to shave says something about his hygiene, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't seem like it was a daily, you know, kind of thing. But,
Mhm.
well, looking at the answer that Joseph gave to Pharaoh, you know, Pharaoh's like, hey, here you can interpret dreams. And Joseph said, no, I can't. Which I think is one of the great dialogues in all the Bible. You know, so I mean, what might we learn about Joseph from the way that he answers Pharaoh?
Well,
It sounds like, go ahead.
I think as Pharaoh, that's actually going to be a relief, because if Joseph is still just a young fella, if you really want to put what he's going to interpret, because we actually know the dream, is not something you necessarily want to put in the hands of a teenager. But if he says, well, it's not me, but I have a God that can do this, wouldn't you maybe rather put your hands, put your fate in a God than in some teenage boy from the prison?
Well, and I do think we learn, and I think it's stated here just a few verses
Mhm.
after this, that he's 30 years old at this point.
Mhm.
Yeah, depending on Pharaoh's age, you know, I look at 30-year-olds now and I think,
Well, yeah.
why
Yeah.
are they letting these children do stuff? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm going to remain silent on that. Andrew.
Going off of that.
I agree with Diane on the 30-year-old thing. Yeah, I also think, now look, here's another deal. Is Joseph's gained some wisdom. And so Joseph's protecting himself. And he's saying, I don't interpret dreams, God does. He does happen to give me the interpretation, but this is a God thing. And so there he could be putting a disclaimer out there.
Okay.
That's what I was thinking too. Like, if he doesn't like
Nice.
my interpretation, at least I can be like, it was God, not me.
Well, comparing what Joseph says to what the chief cupbearer, does the chief cupbearer at any point in his testimony give God credit for the interpretation?
No.
No.
There's a confidence in Joseph in saying that. That can only come with knowing God or walking closely with God.
Yeah, well, several of you had said in the discussion that, you know, we talked about the fact it took 2 years before Pharaoh had this dream, that it could be that God was teaching Joseph humility. So I wonder, but the fact that here 2 years later, Joseph's going, I can't interpret dreams, and yet it appears that when, you know, when he interpreted the dreams for the baker and the chief cupbearer, according to the chief cupbearer, who'd he give credit to? Joseph, right? And I mean, do we see Joseph correcting that anywhere? So I wonder if there's a possibility of seeing some growth in Joseph in these 2 years where he was waiting in prison. And what do y'all see? Skip?
Well, we know from the end of the story, we look at the story not in pieces, but as a whole,
Right.
because we know from the very beginning, from when he gave a bad report about to his brothers and interpret the dream to his brothers. His brothers hated him. His father was not too happy with his second dream, where the moon and the stars would bow down to Joseph. And then you start seeing these successive preparations. God released him from the pit. He provides to slavery, which kind of ends the relationship with his brothers. and he ends up in Potiphar, and it says wonderful things, but God was with him, and everything he did, it succeeded.
Yes.
So he's accomplishing things, and you have this, like Sam was saying, wonderful relationship, strong built that he has with God. So, and then he gets to the prison. He's in charge soon. He's in charge of that. And I think that we see a preparation. We finally know he becomes prime minister. Not yet in the story, but we know that God has been with him and is preparing him, even in spite of the betrayal of his brothers, the betrayal of Mrs. Potiphar, the betrayal of the butler. You have all these betrayals, and where do we grow most? You know, we grow in the success in the happy times, or are we growing in the struggling times? So I think God is using these experiences to teach Joseph humility and to acknowledge that he is the source of all good and perfect gifts.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Cheryl.
Yes, I am. And just as you're saying that, Skip, I was just thinking about, you know, how his job went so well with Potiphar. And then in the jail, he turned out to be like an in charge kind of person. Yeah. If he had gotten out, then it could be very possible that he could have like thought a lot of himself. So maybe he just needed those 2 years to like, you know, to really learn to just look to God and not think, you know, that he was really something great.
Well, you know, in the story, we talked some about how God was willing to let him sit there for 2 years, even after possibly having an expectation of, wow, finally I'm out of here, and yet God had a greater plan. I mean, today, do we still see that there are times that God lets his people sit in what they perceive as misery or difficulty in order to accomplish something that they might not understand? Does that still happen? And what could that look like?
Well, look at Job's life.
Okay, yeah. Got Job. What about for people today?
I think
People suffer a lot today under bad leadership. It helps train them to become better leaders eventually.
Yeah. Sam?
I think of folk I know that have suffered a huge amount, and you just think, Lord, please give them a break, just 6 months. But when it comes to dealing with problems and seeing needs and reaching out to people, I wish I was half as good as them or even a quarter as good as them. But I don't want to go through what they went through to get like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, I'm gonna break some STS protocol here and put somebody on the spot. Skip, I know you were Marine, which I mean that's, you know, that's not quite as tough as being in the Air Force, but still, you know, pretty difficult. So if you want to hear a Marine cuss, you want to start off a conversation that way. But you know, I'm curious. I would almost guarantee you can remember boot camp and some of the things that you went through.
Yeah,
They were basically breaking you down, right?
Yes, you break people down to a common core, and then you build them back up through heavy discipline, a lot of physical fitness, and a lot of exercise. You boil it down and then you build it back up. It's quite a process. It was challenging. Even after my time in training, I went back as a series commander, MCRD, Marine Corps Recruit Depot, San Diego, where I had 13 drill instructors, and they were building these people. I was trying to keep them from not killing a recruit because they think that they'll do anything. If
Yeah.
you have a recalcitrant recruit, it's okay to do him seriously damaged, so he won't break under fire. So, but I think God is preparing through the process. After I was in the Marines for 12 years, and I wanted to go back. At the time, my wife had a great impact upon me. I was a very proud and obnoxious Marine. If you'd known me then, you would not have liked me. But God was gracious through my wife's, and I rededicated my life to Christ, and my life turned upside down. And I wanted to go back and be a chaplain, but Marines don't have chaplains. They have Navy chaplains, so it would mean getting out. So I got out of the Marines, and then I went to seminary in Asbury, just down the road from you, Butch, in Wilmore, and it was a great experience. But when I came back, they said I was too old. I was 32. I was too old. I was too well decorated from the war that I could not be a chaplain. And I thought to myself, this is what I wanted to do. And I was very discouraged, but I believe that God had a plan and was going to open the door. Each of these steps, much like Joseph, you go through experiences, and God is preparing you for what he wants you to do, not necessarily what you want to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Thank you, Skip.
Mm.
And wow, I love that testimony. And I'm curious, in this story, what are some things that might help us today? Because I love that testimony that sometimes God has a plan we don't understand,
Mhm.
but that doesn't mean he's missing in action, right? So what are some things in this story you see that could help you? Johnny?
Yes. One thing that I really liked about the story was when y'all were talking about being humble and giving God the glory and credit. And I would like to share one small testimony at the end.
Okay, well, we're at the end, so
Okay, all right. Well, I was speaking at the AA center, and there was this person who I had just met that day. And that person had asked me if I could pray for that person. So I said yes. It was a woman. So then after like getting some like revelation about and discernment about what she had, I called her up and I began praying for her. And after like 20 or 30 minutes of deliverance or whatever, she started telling everybody that I had like great power and stuff. And then I said, no, that was actually God.
yeah. So just like Joseph. So
Yep.
yeah, awesome. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, Cheryl.
Can I share something also?
Sure.
This reminds me a lot of when we were first in Mexico, and our mission at that time, because like 30 years ago, was church planting. All the people they sent out were church planters. So we trained in Veracruz, came to Cuernavaca to plant a church. So we were planting a church, for working in that for 5 years. And it was just, it was not easy. I mean, there were a lot of wonderful things that God did and stuff, but finally, after 5 years, and through different things that God did, we saw that Andrew really needed to be an evangelist and not in the position of a pastor. And so we ended up going in that direction. But I think it was interesting because those 5 years, they were difficult years. And but since the Lord had plans for him to work with a lot of pastors in the Alliance and in a lot of different ways through courses on that he would teach and everything. Those 5 years were a really good preparation for him because he saw how difficult that pastoring was, and just he saw what pastors feel like and insecurities they have, and a lot of things that made him able to work with pastors and respect pastors and know what they go through. And so we just see that really as God's preparation for what he was going to do later.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
I think,
Yeah, Sam?
yeah, just thinking about it, or the time frame of stuff. God did these big things with the dreams, but there was years in between. And Joseph wasn't sitting around waiting. He was getting on with what was sitting right in front of him to do.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
He wasn't on hold while he was on hold.
Yep. He was just getting on with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Staying with the work. Well, this is a long story, by the way. It doesn't seem like it when you're telling it because it just really flows. It breaks into 3 sections. But it's Genesis 41, 1 through 16, I think it is. So I'm going to stop recording here.